Arthur Conan Doyle, The Sign of the Four. Chapter 12. The Strange Story of Jonathan Small. Part 2. The rain was still falling steadily, because it was the beginning of the wet season. Heavy brown clouds were moving across the sky, and it was hard to see far. A deep ditch was in front of our gate, but in some places it was almost dry and easy to cross. It felt strange to stand there with those two wild Punjabis waiting for a man who was coming to his death. Suddenly I saw a small light from a covered lantern on the other side of the ditch. It disappeared behind some piles of earth and then appeared again, slowly coming toward us. "Here they are," I said. "You will speak to him as usual, Sahib," whispered Abdullah. "Do not make him afraid. Let us go in with him, and we will do the rest while you stay here on guard. Be ready to open the lantern, so we can be sure it is the right man." The light moved forward, sometimes stopping and sometimes coming closer, until I could see two dark figures on the other side of the ditch. I let them climb down the bank, walk through the mud, and come halfway up to the gate before I spoke. "Who is there?" I said quietly. "Friends," came the answer. I opened my lantern and shone a bright light on them. The first man was a very tall Sikh, with a black beard that almost reached his waist. I had never seen such a tall man except at a show. The other was a small, fat man with a large yellow turban and a bundle in his hand wrapped in a shawl. He was shaking with fear, his hands moving as if he had a fever, and his head turning quickly from side to side with small, bright eyes, like a mouse coming out of its hole. It made me feel cold to think of killing him, but I thought of the treasure, and my heart became hard. When he saw my white face, he gave a small cry of joy and ran toward me. "Your protection, Sahib," he said quickly. "Your protection for the poor merchant Ahmed. I have traveled across Rajputana to find safety in the fort at Agra. I have been robbed, beaten, and badly treated because I was a friend of the company. This is a happy night for me because I am safe again, me and my few belongings." "What do you have in that bundle?" I asked. "An iron box," he said, "which holds a few family things that are not valuable to others, but which I would be sorry to lose. Still, I am not poor, and I will reward you, young Sahib, and your officer as well, if he gives me the protection I ask." I could not trust myself to speak longer with him. The more I looked at his fat, frightened face, the harder it seemed to kill him without warning. It was better to finish it quickly. "Take him to the main guard," I said. The two Sikhs moved close to him on each side, and the tall man walked behind, and they went through the dark gate. No man was ever so close to death. I stayed at the gate with the lantern. I could hear their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. Suddenly the sound stopped, and I heard voices and a struggle with the noise of blows. A moment later, to my horror, I heard fast footsteps coming back toward me, with the heavy breathing of a man running. I turned my lantern down the long, straight passage, and there was the fat man running as fast as he could, with blood on his face. Close behind him, jumping like a tiger, was the tall Sikh with a knife shining in his hand. I have never seen a man run so fast as that little merchant. He was getting ahead of the Sikh, and I saw that if he passed me and reached the open air, he might escape. For a moment I felt pity for him. But then I thought again of the treasure, and my heart became hard. I threw my gun between his legs as he ran past, and he fell over like a rabbit that has been shot. Before he could stand up again, the Sikh reached him and stabbed him twice in the side. The man did not cry or move, but lay where he had fallen. I think he may have broken his neck in the fall. You see, gentlemen, I am keeping my promise. I am telling you everything exactly as it happened, whether it is good for me or not. He stopped and held out his hands in chains for the whiskey and water which Holmes had prepared for him. As for me, I must admit that I now felt great horror toward the man, not only because of this cold and cruel act, but even more because of the careless way he told the story. Whatever punishment he would receive, I felt no sympathy for him. Sherlock Holmes and Jones sat with their hands on their knees, listening closely. But they had the same look of disgust on their faces. He may have noticed it, because his voice and manner became more defiant as he continued. "It was all very bad, of course," he said, "but I would like to know how many men in my position would refuse a share of this treasure when they knew they would be killed if they refused. Besides, it was his life or mine once he was inside the fort. If he had escaped, everything would have been discovered, and I would probably have been judged by a military court and shot, because at that time people were not very forgiving." "Continue your story," said Holmes shortly. "Well, we carried him inside, Abdullah, Akbar, and I. He was quite heavy, even though he was short. Muhammad Singh stayed to guard the gate. We took him to a place the Sikhs had already prepared. It was some distance away, where a winding passage led to a large empty hall with brick walls that were falling apart. The ground had sunk in one place, making a natural grave. So we left the merchant Ahmet there, after covering him with loose bricks. After that, we all went back to the treasure. It lay where he had dropped it when he was first attacked. The box was the same that now lies open on your table. A key was hanging on a silk cord from the carved handle on the top. We opened it, and the light from the lantern shone on a collection of jewels such as I had only read about and dreamed of when I was a boy in Pershore. It was almost too bright to look at. After we had looked at them, we took them all out and made a list. There were 143 diamonds of the best quality, including one called, I believe, the Great Mogul, which is said to be the second largest diamond in the world. Then there were 97 very fine emeralds and 170 rubies, although some of them were small. There were 40 carbuncles, 210 sapphires, 61 agates, and many beryls, onyxes, cat's eyes, turquoises, and other stones, the names of which I did not know at the time, though I have learned them since. In addition, there were nearly 300 very fine pearls, 12 of them set in a gold crown. By the way, these last had been taken out of the chest and were not there when I found it again. After we had counted the treasure, we put everything back into the box and carried it to the gate to show it to Muhammad Singh. Then we seriously repeated our oath to stay loyal to each other and keep our secret. We agreed to hide the treasure in a safe place until the country became peaceful again, and then to divide it equally among us. There was no point in dividing it at that time, because if such valuable jewels were found on us, it would cause suspicion, and there was no private place in the fort where we could keep them safely. So we carried the box into the same hall where we had buried the body, and there, under some bricks in the strongest part of the wall, we made a hole and hid our treasure. We carefully remembered the place, and the next day I made 4 maps, one for each of us, and put the sign of the 4 of us at the bottom, because we had sworn that each of us would always act for all, so that no one could cheat the others. That is a promise that I can honestly say I have never broken. Well, there is no need for me to tell you, gentlemen, what happened in the Indian Mutiny. After Wilson captured Delhi and Sir Colin relieved Lucknow, the worst of it was over. New troops kept arriving, and Nana Sahib disappeared across the border. A fast-moving army under Colonel Greathead came to Agra and drove the rebels away. Peace seemed to be returning to the country, and we 4 began to hope that the time was near when we could safely leave with our share of the treasure. But suddenly our hopes were destroyed when we were arrested as the murderers of Ahmet. It happened in this way. When the Rajah gave his jewels to Ahmet, he did it because he knew he was a trustworthy man. But people in the East are suspicious, so the Rajah also chose another servant, even more trusted, and told him to secretly watch the first. This second man was ordered never to let Ahmet out of his sight, and he followed him everywhere. He followed him that night and saw him go through the gate. Of course, He thought Ahmed had taken shelter in the fort, and the next day he asked to enter as well, but he could find no sign of him. This seemed very strange to him, so he spoke to a sergeant, who told the commandant. A full search was quickly made, and the body was found. So at the very moment when we thought everything was safe, the 4 of us were arrested and put on trial for murder. 3 of us because we had guarded the gate that night, and the 4th because he had been seen with the murdered man. Nothing was said about the jewels during the trial, because the Rajah had been removed from power and driven out of India, so no one cared about them. But the murder was clearly proven, and it was certain that all of us were involved. The 3 Sikhs were given life in prison, and I was sentenced to death, although later my sentence was changed to the same as theirs. It was a strange situation for us. The 4 of us were prisoners, with almost no chance of ever getting free. And yet each of us knew a secret that could have made us rich and living in luxury, if we could only use it. It was enough to make a man suffer deeply, to be treated badly by every small officer, to eat only rice and drink water, while such a great treasure was waiting outside for him. It could have driven me mad, but I have always been a stubborn man, so I waited patiently for my chance. At last, it seemed that my chance came. I was moved from Agra to Madras, and from there to Blair Island in the Andaman Islands. There are very few white prisoners in that place, and because I behaved well from the beginning, I soon became a kind of trusted prisoner. I was given a hut in Hopetown, a small place on the side of Mount Harriet, and I was mostly left alone. It is a sad, unhealthy place, and outside our small clearings there were wild native people who would shoot poison darts at us if they had the chance. There was digging, building ditches, planting yams, and many other jobs to do, so we were busy all day. But in the evening we had a little free time. Among other things, I learned to give medicines for the doctor and learned a little of his knowledge. All the time, I was watching for a chance to escape. But it was hundreds of miles from any other land, and there was almost no wind on the sea, so it was very difficult to get away. The surgeon, Dr. Somerton, was a lively young man who liked sports, and the other young officers often met in his rooms in the evening to play cards. The surgery, where I prepared medicines, was next to his sitting room, with a small window between them. Often, when I felt lonely, I turned off the light in the surgery, and then I could stand there, listen to their talk, and watch them play. I like playing cards myself, and it was almost as good to watch others play. There was Major Sholto, Captain Morstan, and Lieutenant Bromley Brown, who were in charge of the native soldiers, and also the surgeon and 2 or 3 prison officials, clever older men who played carefully. It was a very pleasant group.